We're taking a closer look at the state of foster care in Massachusetts. Children enter foster care because they or their families are in crisis. In recognition of National Foster Care Month, Hopewell, the largest nonprofit provider of comprehensive foster care in the state, commissioned a new statewide survey about how people perceive foster care. The hope is that more people will open their homes to children in need. And joining us now is Shahir Mustafa. He is president and CEO of Hopewell. Thank you for being here today. So there is a very urgent need for more licensed foster parents. According to the latest numbers, there are between 8,000 to 9,000 children in the system, but only about 5,500 homes. Now, your organization has seen a significant drop in the number of homes over the past 20 years. Why is that, and how are you working to change it?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me and highlighting this critically important issue. So we've seen this decline over the past 20 years. We've actually seen nearly a 70% drop in the number of licensed homes that we have, that we work with. But this trend has compounded, and first of all, that's a national trend as well. This is something we're seeing across the board, and it was really compounded by the pandemic. So what we see is an aging demographic of folks who are currently foster parents. And so we're seeing less and less younger people kind of stepping up and getting in the game. And, you know, again, the pandemic, I think there were folks that were maybe, you know, I might do this for a couple more years, and the pandemic hit and they just said, this is my time.
Yeah. Some more results. The majority of the people surveyed have a positive impression of foster care. 37% of people have a negative perception of it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so when you slice the data a little bit further, what's interesting is the people that are more proximate to foster care, and when I use the word proximate, I'm saying they either experience foster care themselves, they are foster parents, or they know somebody who's been a foster parent or been in foster care, they have a much more positive view. It's actually people who don't have proximity to foster care, they tend to have a more negative perception, which is something to me, that speaks to we need to get the message out there about what foster care really is to help educate people, because as they become more educated, that needle tends to move and they tend to have a more positive impression.
All right, more survey results. There are many misperceptions about foster care. As you just said, 45% of survey respondents incorrectly said foster care either is or also is the result of behavioral or legal issues with youth. Tell us why this is incorrect, and how could that influence people's willingness to foster?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I wish I had a good explanation for why. I think we're still not totally sure about that, because what's also interesting is that people who had a closer relationship to foster care tended to get the definition of foster care incorrect. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but it is something that we do need to address, because it has nothing to do with the behaviors of children for why they enter foster care. It's really about their parents' or caregivers' capacity to provide a safe environment for them, and that's why they enter foster care, and that's really the message that we need to communicate to
people.
Now,
you were a director at the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, so you've seen many strong foster family relationships develop, but you've probably also seen some very tragic outcomes with the state's foster care system. What can be done to fix it?
So first of all, let me just say that I think DCF gets beaten up quite a bit in the media, and I think they have an impossible job, to be perfectly honest with you. I think they have to preserve the rights of adults and caregivers, and at the same time they have to protect children, and those two things come in conflict all the time. So I just want to name that. That being said, no system is above reproach. They all need to be pushing themselves to be better. And what I can say is they have done a really good job about moving more towards kinship care. We've seen, first of all, the numbers of kids entering foster care have decreased pretty significantly, and we want to see that. We want to see less kids coming into care. But when they do come into care, we want them to go with kin. And those numbers have increased. So I would say they need to continue to do that. They need to continue to support families. And really address issues of poverty. About 84% of families that get involved with DCF are involved for issues of neglect, which to me is a proxy for poverty.
Okay, all right. Shahir, we want to encourage people who are listening to consider being a foster parent or foster family. What qualities are you looking for in a foster family, and who can become a foster parent?
So first of all, anybody who's willing to open their heart and open their home, just generally speaking. Now, that's not enough. This is a very serious decision that people need to make. And actually, my family has made the decision to become foster parents more recently. After 25 years of doing this work, we finally decided, we need to get in the game, and we can't.
And when we say anybody, be clear about who is anybody.
So there's some misconceptions out there. I've heard people say, well, I rent my apartment, I can't be a foster parent. Not true. You don't have to own a property. You can be single, you can be married, you can be partnered, you can be lesbian, gay, bisexual, you can have different religious affiliations, you can work, you can not work. There are very few things that would disqualify somebody
So
from
it's
being
open
a foster
to all.
parent. It's open to all.
Okay,
Yeah.
Shahir Mustafa, thank you for being here to give us some insights
Absolutely,
on
thank you.
fostering here in Massachusetts. We'll put information for Hopewell up on our website so you can learn more about becoming a foster parent.